Hey there, Stampin' friends. Welcome to Movie Monday with Jody Breckbill, Stampin' Queen. Today's card is this gorgeous vintage looking card. I found this on the internet, and so we did this for my Wow Wednesday class in August, and I wanted to show you how we created it. It's going to use a little bit of a distressing technique on some glossy paper, so let's get rolling with that. The thing we're using, or the stamp set we're using, is called Graceful Garden, and this is in our current annual catalog. We're gonna start off with a piece of glossy paper and let's do crumb cake. I have crumb cake and soft suede. So what I want to do is take this kind of trellis looking stamp, and I'm just going to randomly stamp it on my glossy paper. There's really no right or wrong way, just kind of doing some little edges, catching the edges in there. One thing about glossy paper is it takes a little bit of dry time. So the other thing is it's slippery. So when you are stamping, be careful, because it wants to slip a little bit on your stamp wants to slip a little bit on the paper because it's so shiny. So I'm going to use soft suede, and I'm just going to do some random roses in here in a little bit of a darker brown. And now I need to let that have just a smidge of drying time, because we need to sand it, and it will run a little bit if you start to sand it too early and the ink's not dry. What I can do in the meantime is take a piece of shimmery white cardstock, and this is again soft suede ink with the big rose in that stamp. I'm using all the same set, and I cut this like really close. So let me make sure I can fit this guy on here. So I'm just going to stamp my rose on the shimmery white, and again a couple seconds of drying time because we need to watercolor this one and we don't want it to bleed. When you're stamping with anything other than archival black and archival gray, the rest of the inks are not waterproof inks or water resistant, so you have to be careful because they will bleed whenever you get them damp. But I really like the look of having the rose stamped in the brown, so I'm just going to be really careful when I do that. So well, let me go ahead and show you a little bit. I used two colors. I'm using Sweet Sugar Plum, and to watercolor we're going to squeeze the top and the bottom, the ink pad to the top of the lid, and then we get a nice little pool of ink there. And I have my aqua painter. One little trick I use is kind of wiping off the extra water on my hand. That gives me an idea of how wet my paint or my aqua painter is. And so what I'm going to do is just very carefully, you'll have to color each petal individually. You don't want to do a wash all over, to color the whole thing, even though we're going to cut this out. You don't want to do that because that will definitely make your ink bleed. So I'm just being really careful and going around the edges there, just kind of coloring in the leaves and being very careful on the outline. Okay, so I did that with Sweet Sugar Plum. Then I did the same thing with some Old Olive. Clean my brush there, make sure it's not pink because I don't want my pink leaves. And very carefully I just colored in those leaves. Okay, leaves and stem. And so I'm going to finish that later because you don't need to watch me color, because this is what you end up with. Okay, so you're going to then cut that out once it's dry and you're ready to go. And actually the suede almost gives it a little bit of a gold texture. It kind of looks like maybe you stamped that in some gold. So now I'm going to come back with my glossy cardstock, and I'm going to take a sanding block. Now this is an old sanding block I have had for years. It is a very fine grit. You might do a little better with some stronger grit, but that's totally your call. So what I want to do is am I rocking the table? Not too bad. I'm going to sand this the whole way. Oh, you know what? I totally forgot a step. Back up, reverse. Now I'm wondering why it's not looking quite right, because we forgot to do our brayer. Duh. Okay, so I'm going to take my crumb cake ink and I'm going to take a sponge brayer and I'm just going to get some ink on there, and I'm going to roll that across both ways. Okay, the more you roll, the darker your ink will get. This is kind of what's giving it almost like a tea stained appearance. Okay, there we go. Now I'm cooking. I was like, what the heck? Okay, so that's with crumb cake ink. Again, I need to let that dry for a couple seconds, but I want to tell you about this roller. We don't have this anymore. I miss our brayer very badly. Stampin' Up, if you're watching, please bring our brayer back. We have a hard brayer and then we had a foam brayer, and I just miss it. I just do. Okay, so now I'm going to take my sanding block and let's try this again. All right, see how it's starting to then distress my ink a little bit on there? One way and then the other way. Okay, so that's now what I'm looking for. Okay, kind of more like a vintagey tea stained. I got a mess going on now, people. Okay, so then you have some dust on there. Wipe that on your pants. Okay, get that all off. So now it's beautiful. Let's see, what do we do next? Okay, so the next thing I want to do, again, so I'm using all kinds of retired Stampin' Up stuff, which is normally not my policy, but there's some things that I just love. This is another one, the distressing tool. Okay, so what you're going to do is now distress your edges. So this is just going to rough them up a little bit, make it look like it's old and worn out. You can do as little or as much as you like. I like to make sure I get those edges nice and rough looking. This stamp set just works so well with doing like a vintagey look, because it's already, I think, kind of a dated looking stamp, which is in a good way. I mean, I look dated too, and people still like me, so. Okay. Get that yuck out of the way. Get all kinds of little fuzzies there. Then I'm going to take my crumb cake again, and somewhere in my pile of mess, there we are, we're going to sponge these edges. Oh, that one looks like somebody did it in red. All right, let's try another one. You don't want red, that's for sure. Okay, and we're just going to see how now those edges are kind of getting dark. We're getting rid of that white edge that we created and just kind of making it look a little bit more worn. Again, I like to really get my edges good so they're nice and dark. Okay, I'm trying to hurry because I know this is a little bit boring. Nothing like watching somebody sponge ink on cardstock. That's a fun thing to do on a Monday. Okay, so now that kind of gives us our nice distressed look. I took a piece of crumb cake and I did the same thing. Okay, can you see those edges there? So let's attach these two together. Oh, I just hit the camera with my head. Sorry about that. Okay, now I have some of our really cool vanilla lace trim, and I just want to do a little bit of that on the edge here. That kind of just coordinates beautifully with this particular card. And then I'm going to attach that with a piece of soft suede cardstock. I always like to put adhesive over top of my ribbon so it doesn't come off. That'll go on here. Okay, a couple pop dots. Where are they? Dimensionals. Where are you? Here we go. A couple dimensionals on my rose. And then we'll add a little bit of pearl, a little bit more ribbon. Okay, there's my beautiful little rose. I'm going to slide another piece of that trim underneath here and tie. I was going to tie a bow, but it's a little bit short, so we're just going to do a knot there. Trim those edges off. And I don't know where they got to. All right, there's one pearl. Here we are. Oh, they're falling off of my fingers. Okay, so just a couple little pearl embellishments. Okay, and there you go. There's a beautiful vintage card to send to someone that you love or like. So thanks for joining me, guys. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you next week for Movie Monday.